for joining us here this Friday. You're watching India Tonight. I'm Nivedna Prabhu, and joining me is my co-host Jude Sanit. In fact, the both of us are going to be putting into perspective our top story for this evening. U.S. Ambassador-designate to India Sergio Gor said that India's protectionist policies and regulatory barriers have prevented Washington from fully realizing its partnership with Delhi, and if confirmed, he will work to advance trade that is fair, reciprocal and beneficial to Americans. In fact, at his confirmation hearing in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he said that India and the US are not far apart right now on a trade deal, going on to state that India is a strategic partner whose trajectory will shape the region and beyond. Now, as he underlined that he is committed to advancing America's interest in this important partnership. In fact, we have Manjeev Singh Puri, former Indian ambassador, also joining us on the show this evening. In fact, joining both Jude and I to be putting that into perspective. Ambassador, thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here this evening. We appreciate that. Jude, would you like to take the first question across to Ambassador?
Absolutely. Ambassador Puri, thanks so much for joining us here on the broadcast. India is a strategic partner whose trajectory will shape the region and beyond. That's the word coming in from Mr. Gor there. Do you feel this signals some softening of the American stance, really, with regard to its approach to India as a key partner in trade? For the longest time now, we saw the Americans playing hardball. President Trump seemed keen to call out India on what he called protectionist policies being followed by the country. But the fact is that with India's proximity to China and Russia, especially at the recent SCO, is this the first signs of a softening of the American stance, you reckon, Ambassador Puri?
Jude and Nivedana, thank you very much for having me on the program. We can smile a little bit today. First of all, that you are getting an ambassador from the United States. That by itself is positive signal and positivity. The question that you mentioned about trade, hear what Sergio Gor himself had to say. That, there are issues insofar as the way the Trump administration looks at India, and that he'll try to resolve them. The answer lies in negotiations and trying to resolve them. Of course, we must be very clear that he's America's ambassador. He has to stand for American interests. But you are right. At least we have now seen openings and lines from the incoming ambassador that negotiations are likely to lead to some kind of resolving the issues and taking things forward. And I'm deliberately not using the word deal, but finding a solution. That's always positive, and I'm glad that you too look at it like that.
In fact, Ambassador, as you started speaking and said about how that is, a situation that we find ourselves in terms of how we're decoding this. Both Jude and I are going to come back to be talking about that further, but we just want to put into perspective what has really transpired in terms of that statement. So let's quickly listen in to what Gor said, as well as what Marco Rubio had to state.
I'm here to introduce a fellow Floridian and someone who I've known for a very long time, Sergio Gor, who is the nominee to India, which is, I would say, one of the top relationships the United States has in the world today in terms of the future of what the world's going to look like. I said it when I appeared before you as a nominee to the position I currently hold as well.
We might have our moment of hiccups right now. We are on the track of resolving that. Our relationship with the Indian government, with the people of India, extends many more decades, and it's a much warmer relationship than they have with the Chinese. Frankly, they are concerned by Chinese expansionism. And Chinese expansionism is not just on the border of India, it's all over the area. We will make that a top priority, that India is pulled into our side and away from them.
Ambassador, we did hear, that particular statement. In fact, I want to understand from your vantage point, how are we reading into this? I mean, look at the choice of words here. Moment of hiccups, and the fact that, the relationship has gone on for decades, and we know how that has evolved over the years. But it was not India that was making the circumstances that we see today.
So, Nivedana, look, United States had elections, and Mr. Trump came back. for many people, very something which has not happened in the past. And he's come back. It's a very different presidency from Trump one. That was, if you don't mind my saying so, an accidental presidency, and he was surrounded by institutionalists. Now he's got people who are strong on ideology. They are people very strong on money. Donald Trump is very firm on doing things on these tariffs, which are really customs duties, that the American trade is balanced and so on and so forth. And as you know, we run a large trade surplus with the United States. So let's understand the words that, we are trying to make progress. And now we have elements in the US administration, the NSA stroke Secretary of State, the Ambassador-designate, also trying to help and smoothen things out. But let's be also clear that if you think that this is going to go back to status quo ante, that's unlikely to be the case. We need to remember that, there will be hardball negotiations because this tariffs business is something integral to President Trump's domestic agenda. And so, therefore, he is not going to let anybody, in a sense, get off the hook from his perspective. That may be right or wrong. That's a different matter.
Right, Ambassador, in fact, if I could just ask you for a bit, and I want to just quote the most interesting, what I thought at least was the most interesting thing of what Gor said, and I quote, "We're not that far apart in a deal already on these tariffs. Getting India to stop buying Russian oil, however, is a top priority for this administration," end quote. Now, this is rather interesting. On one hand, you see the US wanting to warm up to India all over again, especially given the proximity to the two big powers in Asia, Russia and China. But the fact is that this purchase of Russian oil continues to be a bugbear of sorts in this Indo-US relationship that has existed. The fact that the ambassador, yet to be confirmed, of course, brings this up yet again when you've had the External Affairs Minister of India going on to state ad nauseum multiple times over that India's energy interests come first and that India will continue to buy Russian oil. Do you see that this logjam of Russian oil purchases continuing to rear its head, even as the US apparently wants to look at a renewed relationship with India?
So, Jude, let's also understand geopolitics. Look what has happened in Europe. Some Russian drones have fallen in Poland. NATO has invoked the article which calls of common defense. And while President Trump may have right through seemed as if he wants to do a deal with Russia and, in a sense, ask Ukraine somehow or the other settle, which would have provided a segue on this entire business, that doesn't seem to be happening in the near future in any case. And on the other hand, the Americans have asked the Europeans, be tough on the Indians on tariffs. So, this is going to be an issue just because we are saying what we are saying. We have to say it. We must say it. And at least I am very convinced that India, as the kind of country we are, the size of our country, our economy, as well as our population, largest democracy, we have to tread the path of strategic autonomy. And we have to, sort of make it not just clear to the Americans, but we have to play this game finally. In energy interests for a country like India are particularly important. The Americans will push their own way. But, at the end of the day, countries look at interests and some kind of compromises are possible. Let me take you back to Donald Trump's great words, "I'm the king deal maker." So it's not always that the deal is in favor, but he's very keen on making deals. So let's try and see if we can make a deal.
All right, Ambassador, that of course remains to be seen, the way you're putting that into perspective. And many of them also going on to state that, at the end of the day, he's a businessman. They don't look at it from the point of view of him being the president, given how this is meted out. But I just want to stick with that point, which of course Jude also put into perspective, the, Russian oil angle, because, these are of course significant tariffs for India, and given how vocal they've been about why that is. But how should India really interpret this simultaneous carrot and stick messaging? And what does it really imply in your vantage point for bilateral economic negotiations, Ambassador?
Nivedana, look, as I mentioned to you, he thinks he's the king of the deal. And he's playing both carrot and stick with you simultaneously. Now, in general, most people in India would say, look, our interests lie in doing something positive with the United States. And that there should be a kind of lean in that direction. Our business people say it. Just the general feeling among political people also. There are a number of geopolitical as well as economic reasons. But, on the other hand, this business of oil, energy security, these are very critical for domestic politics in India. So it's a fine line. It's not an easy line to play. I just want to remind you that in Trump 1, when they made the similar sanctions against Iran, we did stop buying oil from Iran. That may not be possible with Russia because of the size of the kind of purchases which is possible, the discounts which are there, the costs which would otherwise be there. So, you have to negotiate this. And on the other hand, I don't want to say it, but let's be hopeful that something can be done on Ukraine and that kind of stuff. It doesn't look very possible, but if that happens, or in some way or the other, President Trump gets the feeling that, that's going forward. We might have this entire lever gone. It doesn't look like that to be the case today. If we can keep working with them, engaging with them, then hopefully in time, there could be some degree of softening on all of this. You have to plug on and keep at it. And of course, be mindful of your own interests. Nothing is more important than your own domestic interests.
Right. Ambassador Puri, you talk about the carrot and stick approach. I want to focus on the carrot for just a bit in the context especially of energy, which of course is so central to this discussion. And I want to quote the yet to be confirmed Ambassador Gor yet again. He says, and I quote, "If confirmed, I will work to increase American energy exports to India, establishing the US as a leading supplier of crude oil, petroleum products and liquefied natural gas." End quote. Could the US possibly be seen as the provider of an alternative to Russian oil? I know there are plenty of ifs and buts here, especially the price advantage, which you spoke about, in fact, just a few moments ago. But could India, by way of this initial offer of sorts, be seeing the first semblance of an alternative to Russian energy? And if the US were to hypothetically increase exports of their petroleum products to India, is there a price advantage as well for us to be had by way of this offer? I know it's very initial days, but what do you make of it? Is this a steady and solid alternative, Ambassador Puri?
Jude, this is not a new thing at all. You should understand President Trump's ideas of tariffs are not like what we think customs duty, WTO. He's talking about balancing trade. We have a $40 billion trade surplus. What are the ways that we can set it? Do you think you'll buy more Levi's jeans or you'll buy more Wrangler products? They are not even made in the United States. There are very few American products that will sell in this market in any case. So what are you at the end left with? They are trying agriculture and dairy. That's a very sensitive thing for the Indian economy. You're left with military hardware and you are left with oil and gas. They always say it. It'll be more expensive than the Russian gas and the Russian oil. We are getting not only is there a sort of a geographical advantage in terms of reaching it, they're giving it to us at a discount. So there will be a price to be paid. And this price is something that, you need to be in leadership positions to be able to see what is possible or not. You can always buy, today you can buy oil from America. That's not a problem. It's a free market in that sense, but you have to pay the going rates of Brent crude, the transportation costs from US, etc., etc. So there's a simple cost element, and that's the reason why we went for Russian oil after the Ukraine thing, because the Middle East oil was going towards Europe, etc., which is making it much more expensive as far as we are concerned. And at the end of the day, you have to look at what are your benefits and so on. And I know people have been talking about that we've benefited by refining and then selling. Well, come on, we are all in the business of it, isn't it? Isn't this what the free market is about? We also need to do some deals.
That's absolutely right, Ambassador Puri. But here's what I want to touch upon. Given, how this has also become the optics of not just the relations that the countries have had, but also the relationship, or rather the so-called friendship. Now, of course, it has to be worded that way between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, which he also highlighted by saying it's unique, that even when Trump criticized India, he went out of his way to compliment the Prime Minister. Although, of course, we know most of them would see it in a vantage point of Trump's style. But does this suggest a personality-driven diplomacy at the highest level, or is it part of a calculated strategy to keep India politically close while pressing on economic economic issues? Because if you look at the timing of this, right, it's coincided with that softer news tone after weeks of kind of remarks that we've seen from people like Peter Navarro. So is that shift genuine? And how should India read that?
So look, let's understand that Prime Minister going for the BRICS summit, then the SCO summit, it's not that the message didn't reach them. But on the other hand, there would also have been calculation that, look, why are we losing a friend? Are they willing to do so in terms of some kind of, let me say, climbing down on their money and their tariffs and, the trade balance kind of issues? I don't think it will be so easy. It won't. We tend to play up this fact that we are critical to the US in terms of their relationship with China. But if Mr. Trump has some different ideas in terms of China, as many people say he wants to do a deal with them, then I'm afraid the calculus at that end is quite different. Although a large number of American leaders, etc., have told them, why are you losing China? And that's exactly what you heard today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's also the NSA, saying. True. But in the United States, it's President Trump who calls the shots and his inner circles. And while Sergio Gor may have been part of that, now he's part of the diplomatic world. So we'll have to see how all of this turns out. I'll just make one point to you. We value personal chemistry a lot. It's not that President Trump doesn't, but I'm not sure in Trump 2.0, personal chemistry is the only thing driving him. His own legacy, his own domestic agenda, his own, let's say, financial side of things, etc. These are some of the issues which, in my opinion, are big drivers for the way he's thinking and, more than that, the way he's acting.
Right, Ambassador Puri, thanks so much for joining us and breaking down that analysis of India-US ties, especially in the light of proposed Ambassador Gor's latest remarks. Thanks so much. Great having you with us here, as always. Right, moving on to Russia and Ukraine. The